Hello, I'm the Pickard and welcome to beautiful and overcast Limousin, France, but I'm embracing the cool. It's although it is warmer than it looks, I'm still in shorts and t-shirt. Now then, in any sort of classic car, if you want to compete in any sort of hill climb event or anything like that, the minimum that you'll be required to install in your car, the minimum that you'll need, is a fire extinguisher and a second throttle return spring. What's a throttle return spring? Well, basically a carburetor just has a little arm on it, and when you rev the engine it just gets pulled, but it doesn't go back on its own. So it opens the throttle itself, but it doesn't return to where it was on its own. It needs a spring to do that, and a throttle return spring is what does that, and it's literally just a spring. It's a pulley apart type spring, not a compressy type spring. In fact, I'll show you one. This is a throttle return spring, and basically every single car that has a carburetor, and many throttle body cars also have a return spring, because it's that simple. Why not? Now then, why do you need two of them? Well, as you can imagine, the mount can break that holds the spring, or the spring can break because over time they do wear through, or something can get damaged and they can get knocked off in the event of an accident, and it stops the engine running off with itself. So basically it stops the engine getting stuck at full throttle. Imagine you're barreling along in your car and you've got your foot flat to the floor and you're driving along and you're caning it, and all of a sudden your throttle return spring breaks, and your foot sinks flat to the floor and your engine's wide open and your engine's screaming and it's going to go pop, right? You can't turn your engine off, because if you turn your engine off, your steering lock goes on, so you can't turn into a lay-by. So you end up having to drive with your engine screaming into a lay-by and turn everything off. Or if you've got a battery cut-off, you can turn your battery cut-off off and turn your engine off without turning your ignition off. But still, it's far, far from ideal. So having two throttle return springs makes sure that if anything should happen to that one spring, there's another spring there to help it. Now, you won't just need one new spring for this, you'll probably need two, because obviously springs are certain hardnesses. Hardnesses? Is that a word? Springs are a certain amount of resistance, and if you add a spring, you'll double that resistance. So you might need two softer return springs. Otherwise, if you've got a really firm return spring on now and you add another one, then your throttle pedals are going to be super stiff. And all it's there to do is pull that arm on that carburetor back up again. So it may just save your engine, and in the event of an accident, it may just stop your car driving off on its own at high speed. And we've all seen those videos where people whiskey throttle and the throttle gets stuck on a motorbike and the motorbike goes ring. In an older 2CV, they don't have a throttle cable. Later 2CVs do. But the majority of all 2CVs ever made have a throttle rod that runs from the pedal all the way through the firewall, all the way to the carburetor. When you put your foot on the floor, it turns the little arm on the carburetor. And the throttle return spring is not on the carburetor. The throttle return spring is on that rod. And the problem with that is, in the event of an incident, such as an accident, such as the little tiny spring that holds the arm of the rod on the carb, if that should come off for whatever reason, if the little spring clip should break or anything like that, you've then got no throttle return spring. And it's all the way over there, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it will be stuck on, because 9 times out of 10, when something happens, it happens at full throttle. So, if you had a spring at the carburetor to close up that carburetor in the event of an incident, or in the event of you lifting your foot off the throttle, that would be a very, very good thing, because then you've got two. You've got one on your rod and you've got one on your carb to close off that carburetor. The problem is, in an older 2CV, there is nowhere to put a second spring. On a later 2CV, well, on a later Diane, some of the airbox designs have a second perch for your throttle return spring. They have 2 perches, so you can put 2 springs on. However, many 2CVs don't have this. So, come up with a design for the ability to fit a second throttle return spring to your 2CV. And it fits to the bolt at the back of the coil. So the little bracket that holds your coil on, the bolt that goes through it, fits on the back of there. And today we're going to make that little bracket. And then we're going to fit a second throttle return spring to Jolene. Because even though I'm not doing hill climbs, even though I'm not doing motorsport in Jolene, if it's the minimum requirement for any sort of competition, it's for a damn good reason. It's for a safety reason. And any safety thing that you can do for your car, it's a really good idea to do it, because it's not going to do anything but make your car safer and better. So that we never have that problem, today we are fitting a second throttle return spring and making a little bracket to hang this little blighter on. And I'm going to show you how. Come with me. So for this, you're going to need a throttle return spring, obviously, because that's what we're fitting to the car. Our little bracket is made of a penny washer. Now then, this penny washer says A4. A4 means that it's 316 marine grade stainless steel. There's a little bit of trivia for you. It doesn't have to be stainless steel, but honestly, if you're going to be bolting a washer into your car, it might as well be. It's one out of my box of stuff, I'm sure. Pretty much everybody out there has one of these in the bottom of their toolbox somewhere. And it's a small, I think it's a 6mm hole in the centre of that. And a bigger washer is better. This is what I had. If I had a slightly bigger washer, it would be a better thing. But that's what I'm using. I've also got a piece of scrap wood, because we're going to be drilling another hole in our washer, and I don't want to drill into the table. I have a hammer and a punch. You might not need a hammer and a punch, but anytime I'm drilling stainless, I like to have a hammer and a punch, because it keeps the drill bit central. I have a pen for marking things, and I have mole grips. Now then, you don't necessarily need these, but it will make things much easier. There's numerous ways that you can bend a washer, but we will be bending this washer at some point. So, first things first, we need to drill a hole in our washer. So, our first job is to drill a second hole in our washer. And for convenience, I'm doing it at the point of the A, because I can. So, I'm going to get my little hole punch. I'm going to do that. The camera's going to have to go back, otherwise I'll hit the camera with the hammer. Like that. That just puts a little dot in. You'll also need a small but sharp metal drill bit. A non-metal drill bit will not do. And in our house, drill bits like this go missing. They're a bit like left socks. I'm using a set of mole grips to hold my washer, because obviously the washer will get hot as you drill it because of friction. And when you're drilling stainless steel, pressure is more important than speed. Stainless is a bit weird, it gets harder the hotter it gets. You could, of course, do this on a drill press, but a cordless hand drill is more than sufficient for a washer, and that is why we need our scrap bit of wood, because I'm not drilling into the table. Now then, in our car, if this hole was straight, we'd have a bit of an issue, because there's the breather. You know, we have the oil pickup and we have the engine breather, and this is going in between the oil pickup and the engine breather. So if it was straight, the spring, the thickness of the spring, would rub on the edge of the breather, and that's no good. So what we need to do is we need to turn it to kind of 45 degrees like this. And I'm going to draw a line through it. This isn't super accurate, but it kind of doesn't have to be. It's only, he says super accurate, and then he really fudges it up. And then, there we go. Right, and I'm going to bend this bit out. So I'm going to grab it in my grand pliers, that aren't grand pliers, the mole grips. I just get grand pliers and mole grips mixed up. I don't know why. When I was learning Spanish, I used to get anillos and uñas mixed up, which is fingernails and rings. But those two words somehow just seem similar to me. Now, you can do this obviously in a vise. My vise isn't set up because my workshop doesn't exist yet. So I'm using a pair of gland pliers. And I'm just going to give it a nice healthy bend, as bent as I can get it, to be honest. Now we have our bend, like that. Now this is going to fit on the, it's a bit skew if I'll just tidy it up a bit. They do some little hand brakes, which is a metal folding tool for folding small metal things, but they're expensive and not everybody has them. And when I do these videos like this, I always try and use stuff that everybody has at home, like Blue Peter with classic cars. Okay, so now we've got a decent bend in our washer. The other issue is that it's going on something round, so if I take my hammer, you'll notice that this edge here sticks up, if you will. This is going to be bolted to something round, and so I want to be able to bolt it up and this edge not be proud, because that'll bug the heck out of me. So now I'm going to bend kind of the top of, where's my pen? Kind of the top of it there. I'm going to bend in the opposite direction, because this is designed to stick out because I want my spring to fit to it, but the top edge that does nothing I don't want to stick out, so I'm going to bend that way. So I'll get my little mole grips and hold it. Hopefully there'll be enough purchase for these big mole grips. Put my big mole grips on first, like that. It's a lot of work to bend a washer, but okay. So that's basically our washer. The reason why we bent that is that when it's mounted to the bar, look, it will be nice and flush. And it's obviously not, it's not an oval bar like this, but it's round. But you can just see that it'll be reasonably flush. It needs a bit more probably. Now, if you want to get any of the scratches or anything off the washer, then use a piece of wet and dry sandpaper and then polish it with some Autosol or something like that, and it'll be all shiny and pretty. But you might be asking, why has Oliver made a video that's however minutes long about drilling a hole in a washer and bending it a bit? The reason is that making this washer, this whatever 5p washer, I'm also going to, by the way, get rid of any swarf that's inside here with a small round file. But this 5p washer that you have now just bent and drilled a hole into might actually save you €1,000 engine rebuild, and it's all because of a 5p washer. How cool is that? Like I say, I'm now going to just file out this little hole, make sure there's no swarf in it because I don't want my spring to chafe. Okay, so if we look here, this is the original throttle return spring, and it attaches on a bracket there, and it attaches to the rod here. And when you press the throttle pedal, it stretches. But as you can imagine, if this ever broke, the throttle would come forward and this rod here would jam wide open, jamming the throttle open because the throttle pedal would just hit the floor, and that's a no good. So we're going to put our throttle return spring here. Now then, the reason why we put these bends in is going to become very obvious in about a second. So if I bring this here, See, this is the problem with having giant hands. There we go, look. Now you can see where I put the bends, the washer now hugs the light bar. The nut's easy to get to, and the spring perch is out and away from anything, because the spring is going to go on a little hole in the accelerator arm. But now I need to do the incredibly fiddly job of tightening the nut on the back of this without dropping it. Like that. Don't drop it like that. Don't do that. Right, so the thing is that, like I said, this is not the world's most complicated video, but that's kind of a nice thing, because it means that everybody at home can do it. If you don't have giant sausage fingers like me. Now, if I'm quite honest, this spring that I'm using is probably a little too hard, because it's what I've got. I just happen to be filming this video in my lunch hour, which is why you can hear the knocking and the banging in the background. But it goes that way. The work must go on, because we're trying to get the house tight for winter. And there will be a barn video soon, barn people that keep asking me about the barn. And in France, everything closes at lunchtime. And the reason I'm filming this in my lunch hour is because later it's going to be raining. So this is the spring that I've got. I'll just end up with a very stiff throttle. So like I said, my next job is to drill a little tiny hole in the throttle arm. Now I'm just going to take off the throttle arm and carry it over to the table. Like that. The reason why we've drilled it on the bench and not on the car is obviously if you slip with the drill bit, it's going into the side of the carburetor, and you don't want to do that. Because the carburetor is soft aluminium, and you'll just ram straight into it and knack your carburetor, and they're, you know, well over 100 euros. So simply, you drill a hole in it, not too close to the nut, because if you draw a line from where you've got you spring bolted to the little throttle arm, as you throttle down, obviously that nut and that hole are going to get very close to each other, so it needs to be quite far up. I've chosen about the middle. Now I need to get rid of any burr that's on this throttle arm. This is the other reason to remove it. It's literally one bolt and a washer, so just put the bolt and the washer in a safe place. And you'll have to remove the little box spring as well that fits on the arm. And yeah, so now we're going to remove the burr from the edge of the hole. And the reason is, one, it's sharp and it can cut your finger, but also, if it's sharp, it'll also damage the spring. Now that I'm using a much larger drill bit, and I'm just gonna, and it just knocks the burr off. You can use a tool called a nogger as well, but because this is what most people have, this is what I'm using. And there we go. We've got no burr, we've got no harsh edges, and you saw how little I had to spin that on there. And now we can bolt it back on the car. Accelerator rod back on. Oh, my giant fingers. I wish I had tiny dainty hands. I don't, but for the sake of this, I do. There we go, throttle rod's back on. Like I said, if that should ever pull off, there's nothing stopping this from being stuck wide open. So now we've got that back on, and I'm just going to tighten this while I remember. Now I have the incredibly fiddly job of connecting the spring. I'm actually going to open this up slightly. It's going to make it much easier to get on. is my incredibly quick, simple and inexpensive secondary throttle return spring do-it-yourself kit. You can pick all of that stuff up at your local hardware store if you don't already have it in your toolbox. It's super simple. Like I said, I did it in my lunch hour. The rain has now come to water the garden for me. How good's that? That saves me a job. But yeah, you can, like I say, it's such a simple and easy thing to do, and it could actually save your life or someone else's. It's that important. It's one of the reasons why it's a tech inspection thing for any sort of competitive motor racing, classic or modern. If it's carbureted or if it's got a throttle return spring, it needs two. It's that important. And by sharing this video with a friend who has a classic or a friend who has an older 2CV or any 2CV, you could actually save their life or someone else's. So by sharing this video on social media or with your friends, you could actually save a life. How cool is that? Oh, speaking of which, I did a tyre video the other day, and straight after the tyre video, I know someone that went out and they tested their inner tube, and their inner tube valve was knackered on their car and they replaced it, and another person who checked their tyres and their tyres were massively out of date and they're replacing their tyres, so we might have saved 2 more lives as well. So how cool is that? So if you like this video, please make sure you click like down below. If you do this kit, if you make this at home, please make sure you send me photos on the social medias. I'm always super happy to see you guys working on your cars. And please, if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe. Thank you all for watching. Please be awesome to each other. My battery's about to die. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.